live in a very weird world. And the more we discover about our planet, the stranger it gets. Every day, news stories reach us. Stories that surprise us.
What is that?
Shock us.
Whoa!
Sometimes even scare us.
Oh my God!
We've scoured the globe to bring you the most curious creatures. The most extraordinary people.
I can stick almost anything to my skin without no glue.
And the most bizarre behavior. Using eyewitness accounts and expert opinion to explore a weird world of unexplained underwater blobs, flying goats, and glow-in-the-dark fish. We examine the evidence, test the theories, to work out what on earth is going on. In this episode, an Australian town under attack from aerial invaders.
It smells, the noise.
An exquisite piece of alien artwork.
Oh my God!
And the mystery of sperm whales washed up on the North Sea coast. But first, to the USA, Denison, Texas. Like most American towns, Denison has a main road. Nothing unusual about that. Well, that was until the morning of May the 29th, 2015.
Yeah, this one's not for the squeamish out there, but it's still fascinating.
This highway became the scene of a very strange sighting. Balls of worms appeared overnight, squirming in circles, all lined up exactly between the centre lines. Piles of worms. And not small piles. I'm talking about massive piles of worms. Hundreds piled together in the middle of a Texas road. But why had these animals come together in such unusual numbers? With no one admitting to putting them there, the people of Denison were left baffled. So the footage was put online, where it caught the attention of an expert.
It is really unusual to see them lined up in the middle of the road like that. I've never ever seen that before.
Now, Emma could think of some good reasons why the worms had clumped together like this.
It's much, much safer for the earthworms once they're on the surface to actually congregate into these big balls. Worms actually breathe through their skin, so they do need to stay moist at all times. So being up on the surface, being exposed to the sun's rays is actually really, really harmful, and they can die pretty quickly. But, of course, if they're encased around with other worms, that will actually keep them a lot safer.
OK, so the worms had balled together for safety. But this doesn't explain why they were on the road in the first place. There just didn't seem to be a sensible answer. And whilst the residents were there, scratching their heads, looking for clues, the day just got weirder and weirder, with reports coming in of something equally odd 75 miles south in Dallas.
Check this out. It's just amazing.
Andre Russo captured this bizarre footage of fish, trapped, dead in a fence, a metre above the ground.
Check that out.
My first reaction when I saw all these fish in the fence was, holy cow, this is bizarre.
bizarre indeed. I mean, it's not every day you see a suspended fish stuck in the fence of a playing field.
I didn't expect to see that at all, because suddenly I'm walking around and these prehistoric-looking things with mouths full of teeth are suddenly right there, and it was just, you know, immediately to the cell phone, what is this?
Well, these freaky-looking fish are gars, one of the largest freshwater fish in North America. Often called living fossils, they've remained virtually unchanged for the last 100 million years. Sharing the world with T-Rex and velociraptors, these truly are prehistoric beasts. So Andres knew what these fish were, but why were these unfortunate few stuck so high and dry? Wow, that was a mystery.
It was just weird. You don't expect to see a whole bunch of fish randomly sitting in a fence, and no one's gonna show up, oh, I've got a great idea, let me take all these dead fish and stick them in a fence. No one's gonna do that, so how did they get there?
So, we have two bizarre animal appearances, 75 miles apart, happening within hours of each other. Could these strange sightings be linked? What could they possibly have in common? Well, it turns out that May was a busy month for this corner of Texas. While fish and worms made mysterious appearances, a much more public event was making itself felt. In the month before these weird happenings, a whopping 37 trillion gallons of rain fell on Texas. It pushed the water table far beyond its normal range. Lakes spilled over, rivers burst their banks, and large parts of Dallas experienced severe flooding, affecting not only the community living along the river, but also its fish.
The entire field where I was had been flooded. It would have been about chest high for me. That's a significant amount of water.
Significant indeed. Enough water for the fish to swim easily over the fence, across the flooded fields, looking for something to eat. But when the water level dropped, well, the way home was blocked.
I mean, I imagine the small ones got through the holes in the fences, no problem, but the bigger ones, they happened to get stuck.
It was a miserable end for these fish in the fence. But what about those worm balls on the road? Could the extreme Texan weather provide the key?
It had been raining really, really heavily. Everywhere was absolutely saturated, completely waterlogged. So basically, all these worms had to come up to the surface. And as they're trying to escape, they've all hit this big tarmac road.
To avoid drowning, the worms took to higher ground. But this still doesn't explain why they lined themselves up in between the double yellow lines.
Earthworms don't have eyes like we do, but they are very sensitive as to whether it's light or dark. So when they've got into this middle black area, they've maybe stayed there and then not wanted to venture the other side either because of the other yellow line. So maybe it feels to them a little bit safer.
And so, the worms huddled together, safe from the floods, but trapped between the lines. No other parts of Texas had recorded the same nightmarish piles of worms or weird fish stuck in fences. This was a very location-specific event, down to the unprecedented levels of rain that had come together to produce the perfect storm. Next, we travel down under to a small town with its own set of strange invaders. New South Wales, Australia. The coastal town of Bateman's Bay sees its fair share of tourists.
People come to Bateman's Bay to relax, to take it easy. They like the visual aspect of it, they like the clean beaches, they like the trees.
But in 2016, the bay became famous for an invasion of much more unwelcome visitors.
It's horrible. It smells, the noise. You can't hang your washing out.
Everyone's moved out. There's only 3 of us left in this whole block of units now.
Bateman's Bay is under siege.
The worst thing is when they go over night time. They block out your TV. It's just all black.
I need to get rid of them. Otherwise, I don't know, bad things are going to happen.
The people of Bateman's Bay have had their peaceful lives turned upside down by an invasion of bats. And not just any old bat, giant Australian fruit bats, otherwise known as the grey-headed flying fox.
Grey-headed flying foxes are one of the largest bats in the world. Their wingspan is about 1 metre.
That's the length of a large dog. Each bat weighs up to 1 kilogram, and they don't fly alone either.
Flying foxes are highly colonial animals. They roost in large aggregations during the day in the open canopy of trees.
Now, the area around Bateman's Bay has always been a flying fox hotspot, roosting out in the wilderness beyond the town. But in 2011, these bats turned their backs on the bush and set their sights on the town centre. Year by year, their numbers have rocketed from around 10,000 to over 100,000. It's the largest number ever recorded in an urban area. And the reason behind this relocation? Well, it's all to do with this. Flying foxes are fruit bats and feed on fruit and nectar, and there's nothing they like more than the nectar-rich flowers of a gum tree.
The forests around Bateman's Bay contain a large number of a eucalypt species known as spotted gum. It produces particularly rich nectar flows from its flowers. So spotted gum is almost like a magnet for flying foxes.
Not only is the centre of Bateman's Bay close to these tasty trees, but it's also got a good supply of fresh water and lots of trees to roost in during the daytime. This place is a bat heaven. And when you consider that large areas of forest in the surrounding area have been cut down for logging and farmland, wow, bedding down in the centre of town makes perfect sense to the flying fox. It's just that the human population is not quite so happy about it.
Everyone's had a dog that's barked a lot next door to their neighbours and it drives you insane. Well, multiply that by 100,000 and then you actually get an idea of the physical and the mental stress that's placed on a community with that size of numbers.
It's not that the residents of Bateman's Bay are entirely anti-bat. They're not. It's just that they'd rather they weren't living quite so close to their homes. So, they've cut down a couple of the bats' favourite trees and they're using bright lights, some loud noises and smoke to safely and humanely encourage the flying foxes back into the bush.
80% of our shire is covered in national park and forest, and flying foxes are more than welcome to go to that 80%, and we need to encourage them to do that.
It's not just a respect for nature that's motivating the residents here. You see, bats play a vital role in the ecosystem.
Every night when they're feeding in the bush, they collect pollen in their fur, on their heads, and they move it to each successive tree that they visit. And in doing that, they're providing an extraordinary service.
Pollination, you see, keeping the forests alive. Good for the flying foxes and good for people too. So let's hope that man and bat find a happy compromise and peace can return to Bateman's Bay as soon as possible. Our next unusual animal sighting was reported much closer to home. January the 9th, 2016. Germany. A sperm whale the size of a double-decker bus was washed up on the north coast. Then, within a few hours, another whale appeared. Then 3 more nearby. A few days later, 6 more sperm whales stranded. Unbelievably, the news got worse. Whales began appearing on English beaches. The world's media looked on horrified as over a period of 3 weeks, 29 sperm whales washed ashore. Their bodies found all along the North Sea coast. It was the largest mass sperm whale stranding event in the North Sea since records began. The UK's leading whale stranding expert rushed to the coast to investigate.
I've never had to deal with anything like that before, both emotionally and physically. We haven't had an event of this magnitude on the sperm whales for 100 years. The question for us is, what happened?
What could possibly cause so many sperm whales to strand in such a short period of time? Well, whales do strand across the world every year. In 2004, 150 melon-headed whales came ashore in Hawaii. And in 2005, over 100 pilot whales stranded in Tasmania. But both of these events had one thing in common. They coincided with large sonic activities, naval testing and minesweeping. Whales have particularly sensitive hearing, and loud, unnatural sounds can interfere with their navigation. But in 2016, there was no evidence of any naval exercises or other loud underwater disturbance. Rob went back to the drawing board.
Wind farms might be causing it, and then we had some more esoteric ones. Maybe a large hadron collider might be impacting, or climatic factors, the El Niño's going on, that might be having an impact too. And those things we want to consider.
But then, more information arrived from Germany. Post-mortem examinations of sperm whales revealed something disturbing. Inside their stomachs was plastic. A lot of plastic. Plastic in the marine environment is a very, very serious issue. And surely a whale with its stomach packed full of this stuff would suffer some very serious health problems. So could it be that this oceanic litter is responsible for the stranding? That would be case closed. Well, actually, no. Because you see, not every whale had a stomach full of plastic. So plastic could not have been the cause of the stranding. It was a case of back to the drawing board, or perhaps more pertinently, back to the history books. You see, although this stranding in 2016 was the biggest in historical times, or say the last 100 years, if you go back further into the past, a very curious picture emerges. These works of art date from as far back as the 16th century. It's a very familiar scene, isn't it? The 2016 event was by no means the very first mass sperm whale stranding.
There are many famous historical accounts of sperm whale strandings and mass strandings all around the southern North Sea.
And And well, frankly, you can't help but notice that these whales are all males. But what about the 2016 whales? Is there a link? Well, what was startling about the latest stranding was that they too were all males, every single one of them. And that wasn't all. These old works of art show the exact same stretches of coastline. Whales have been stranding here for centuries. So what makes this coast so deadly for sperm whales? Sperm whales like to live in water thousands of meters deep. But this part of the North Sea is surprisingly shallow, in some places only 50 meters deep. Sperm whales use an impressive biosonar to navigate and find food. It's the loudest sound produced by any living creature. It's perfect for deep water, but in this part of the North Sea, the sonar bounces against the shallow ocean floor. The whales become confused and they lose their way. Now, the North Sea is a death trap. There isn't anything to eat because the squid, their main prey species, is mainly found in much deeper water. And as sperm whales get all their fluid from their food, no food means no water. They become dehydrated, weak, and confused.
If they don't get out of there, their chance of stranding are probably quite high.
But why do so many strand at once? And why are they always male? When young males grow up, they form groups called bachelor pods that migrate to colder waters in search of food. All 29 whales that stranded in the North Sea were most likely from the same bachelor pod. All it takes is for one to make a wrong turn and the entire pod will follow, even into a dangerously shallow sea. This was undeniably a horrible tragedy, but paradoxically, it might also be a sign of some good news. You see, since 1986, when most commercial whaling was outlawed, some whale populations have begun to increase. Now, we can't say for certain that that's the case with sperm whales, but it's likely. And of course, if there are more sperm whales in the ocean, there are likely to be more sperm whale strandings. So although this was a very sad event, we can perhaps look forward to some better things to come. So, from invasive invertebrates to stranded leviathans, animals can turn up in the weirdest of places. Coming up, what happens when technology and nature meet? First up, let's find out how a robot could help save one of the world's greatest natural wonders. This is the Great Barrier Reef, the world's largest living structure, and it's under attack. Tropical cyclones are becoming more frequent and severe, battering and damaging the reef. And warming seas have caused widespread bleaching of living coral. But there is a much nastier threat. The reef is being devoured by a lethal predator that's multiplying at an alarming rate. With a voracious appetite for living coral, it leaves only death and destruction in its wake. The culprit is something you may not expect.
We're in the midst of an outbreak of crown-of-thorn starfish right now.
Yes, the coral-killing culprits are starfish. Crown-of-thorn starfish, or COTS. Growing to almost 1 metre across, these things are coral-eating machines.
The big problem with crown of thorn starfish is that they have voracious appetites. And coral is their #1 food.
And their appetite isn't the only problem.
A single female can generate 100 million eggs. And so they have an amazing capacity to multiply and then spread from one reef to another.
In healthy reefs, there are only 1 or 2 starfish per acre. But in outbreak areas, there can be thousands. So what has caused this invasive invertebrate to swarm in such numbers? Its natural predators, like the Triton snail and humphead wrasse, are in serious decline due to shell collecting and overfishing. But there's an even more serious issue.
The release of pollution from agriculture, which is then fertilizing the water and helping these starfish propagate.
When excess nutrients run off farm fields and into the ocean, plankton blooms. And starfish larvae thrive on plankton. With too much food and nothing to keep COTS numbers in check, the situation is desperate. So can anything be done to stop these coral killers? In the 1960s, when these outbreaks first occurred, well-meaning divers went down, collected the starfish, and cut them into pieces. The thing is, each of those pieces can regenerate into a fully formed starfish, so this simply made matters worse. Thankfully, after years of research, scientists have come up with a far more precise method.
Teams of divers go out on a boat, they'll take a solution of what are known as bile salts, and you inject that single injection into the body of the starfish, and that can kill the starfish.
Bile salts dissolve the starfish from the inside out, rapidly killing it, but without polluting the marine environment. It's effective, but it's labour-intensive. With such a massive reef, there must be millions of crown of thorn starfish out there. And of course, human divers have got a limited amount of time that they can spend under the water, and they're limited to how deep they can go. So to get rid of them that way will be a monumental task. What they needed was a far more efficient solution to this thorny problem. Introducing COTSpot. A team at the Queensland University of Technology have developed a dedicated starfish destroyer.
What we've actually done is designed a robot like a predator. And it's a robot for killing crown of thorn starfish.
How does it look? Pretty stable?
1 metre. We've developed this system to actually manoeuvre around the reef by itself. It has an onboard brain that interprets the environment. It has a vision system to be able to detect organisms on the seafloor. And at that time, it's actually looking for these crown of thorn starfish.
This robot can actively seek out its victim using a state-of-the-art vision system. It then manoeuvres itself for a closer look. And with one stab of a needle, it's game over for the starfish.
You'll see the arm go down, delivers a dose of 10 millilitres of bile salts, retracts, brings its arm back up, and then the robot moves on to the next starfish.
And this ingenious invention isn't just precise, it's also practical.
They don't get tired. We can go down to 100 metres. Currently, occupational divers can only go to 30. We can operate at night. So we could eradicate quite a few hundred a day. This is actually going to make a big difference. So it's something I'm very proud of, and hopefully we'll see more types of these solutions to help protect our natural environment in the future.
It's hoped that in the future there'll be a whole fleet of robots patrolling the reef, helping to protect one of the world's greatest and most fragile ecosystems. But it's not just our oceans that are under attack. Our skies are being invaded too. In 2016, more than 1.5 million drones were sold worldwide. No one is safe from these flying cameras. And with so many amateur filmmakers now taking to the sky, it's not just humans who are unhappy with the aerial intrusion. Drones are easy to come by these days. Just watch this. Look at that. This one only cost a few pounds, and anyone can fly them. Well, almost anyone. But the fact that you can get them quite literally off the shelf, and they're relatively easy to fly, means that they are becoming a bit of a problem. When wildlife takes on these aerial spies, it can make entertaining viewing. But in the wrong hands, drones become a very serious danger indeed.
As well as leisure use, drones present the possibility of use for criminal purposes. There's also the potential for drones to be used by terrorists with spectacular consequences. Certainly this is an issue that is at the forefront of governments and defence corporations thinking about how we respond to the potential, only the potential so far, use of these things for what we call nefarious purposes.
The possibilities are too terrifying to imagine, and it's a problem that needs to be solved.
The issue of how to deal with problem drones has come up with a whole variety of novel solutions. The manufacturers themselves have talked about geofencing, building in software to the drones to prevent them going anywhere where they could cause a real problem. Airports, nuclear power stations. The Japanese have developed a drone with a net underneath, a sort of a version of aerial lacrosse that scoops small drones out of the air.
All good solutions, but in the global fight against dangerous drones, there's a more surprising strategy. In 2014, a team of Dutch security experts started employing a flyer even more skilled than the drones.
Other technologies have been investigated. The most novel one of those is the potential use of eagles.
Yep, you heard it right. He said eagles. The Dutch team believe that eagles might just be the perfect weapon to combat dangerous drones. Eagles clearly are supreme aerial predators. With eyesight 8 times better than ours, a drone has no chance. Even the rotor blades are no problem for their immensely powerful talons. And if large gatherings of people were under threat, like at a sporting event, a trained eagle could be the perfect weapon to safely neutralize a suspicious drone. Eagles trained in anti-drone defence are now being very seriously considered by police forces all over the world. And I suppose we could think of this as a perfectly evolved, natural solution to a new high-tech problem. Next, to North Africa, where a surprising discovery in the dunes could take us to other worlds. 2008, Morocco. On the edge of the Sahara, German professor Ingo Reschenberg made an astonishing discovery.
I was very, very excited. Very excited. I was crying.
Now, Professor Reschenberg has dedicated his life to designing machines inspired by nature. He loves the climate and the tranquility of the Sahara and spends his winters living here. But one night, he was in for the shock of his life.
I was going outside in the night, and an animal was crossing me. I had the feeling it's a very large animal, maybe a jumping mouse, or maybe a lizard or something else. And then I looked, and just before me, a spider was sitting down. A spider with the size of about 10 centimeters, a very large spider.
And as Ingo watched, the spider did something extraordinary.
Suddenly, the spider was rolling away. I was crying. Look, the spider is rolling.
Yes, the spider was indeed rolling. But that's not so strange. Because there is, in fact, another spider that rolls. The golden wheel spider. It balls itself up to roll down the dunes. So why was Ingo so excited? Well, this Moroccan spider was different. It wasn't just rolling downhill, but uphill.
The spider was rolling up the dune. And so I must say I was very, very excited.
It was a completely unique form of locomotion, totally new to science. But why would a spider want to do this?
The velocity when rolling is twice the velocity when the spider is walking with 8 feet. And that's a big advantage.
In the desert, this spider could be prey for larger and faster beasts, like the fennec fox or the pompilid wasp. When threatened, this amazing arachnid flips into rolling mode and doubles its speed for a fast getaway. It's just brilliant.
And of course, it's every biologist's dream to discover a new species. The strange thing is that Prof. Reschenberg is not a biologist. He's a scientist with a very particular specialisation.
My interest is mainly bionics. That means that we try to study the performance of biological systems. Then, of course, we try to imitate this and to develop a new machine or something else.
He's being quite modest here. Professor Ingo Reschenberg is at the very top of his field, world-renowned for designing robots inspired by nature. So, after discovering the spider, Professor Ingo Reschenberg did what any world-renowned bionics engineer would do.
So we started to imitate the motion, and our aim now is to design a robot which is able to do both, to walk and to move in the wheeling condition.
And here it is. Yes, a robot that rolls just like the spider. It's certainly a very clever bit of engineering, but the question is, why? I mean, what possible purpose would there be for such an invention? Well, Professor Reschenberg has big plans for his little robot.
You see, with this particular type of movement, it has the potential to boldly go where no robot spider has ever gone before.
We hope that NASA or also here ESA will become interested then when you finish the robot to design a larger one, yes, than we design here for the use on the next Mars mission.
A robot on Mars, able to walk and roll, adapting to even the most challenging alien landscape.
So, space really could be the final frontier for our little spider robot. Crawling and rolling over the surface of Mars. And just to think that all of that came to pass because of a chance encounter with a real spider in the Sahara. One that now bears the name of the man who discovered it, Sir Brennus
So we've learned, when nature and technology meet, the results can be both ingenious and wonderful. Coming up, a weird world of new discoveries. First stop, though, the Amazon. South America, 2011. Field biologist Aaron Pomerantz was on an expedition in the deepest reaches of the Amazon rainforest.
There is an insane amount of diversity out there. So I was walking down this trail that was just covered in mud, and I just sort of casually walked past this tree. When I took a closer look, I noticed something I wasn't really expecting.
Hanging from a tree was something minute and extraordinary. A strange structure, delicate and complex. It was like nothing Aaron had ever seen before.
This structure is really odd looking, like a little hanging orange basket. It just looks like something 3D printed it. I was just like, oh my god, I need to catch this, like we need to look at this further.
Just look at that. It was bright orange, made out of a very delicate lattice. It's like a little alien basket. But what was even stranger is that when Aaron peered inside, he could see something in there. Something that any entomologist would easily recognize. It was a pupa, a moth chrysalis. Which means the tiny alien structure Aaron found was, in fact, a cocoon. Cocoons are made to keep caterpillars safe as they transform into moths. They need to be weatherproof and to keep out any predators. So why would a moth create such a fragile structure? Well, a pupa in the rainforest has one particularly prolific predator.
Ants are everywhere in the neotropics. And so we think that this adaptation with this odd structure allows the pupa to sort of hang there where it's protected, away from ants.
Yes, suspending itself on a long, thin thread, the cocoon becomes ant-proof. Even the most persistent and hungry ant can't safely descend such a long, thin fibre. But then, why the weird lattice work? Surely the pupa would be safer completely enclosed. Well, you see, living on a long, thin thread is a very fragile existence. Too much weight or wind will snap the thread, and it will be game over for the pupa. So the caterpillar that made this cocoon came up with an ingenious plan. But to understand it, we need to look at the structure more closely. The nearest we can get to making something so intricate is with a 3D printer. And here is our cocoon copy. And here's a more classic-looking cocoon with nice, safe, closed sides. If we recreate rainforest conditions, the solid cocoon becomes waterlogged and heavy. But the lattice lets the rain drain straight through. This keeps the cocoon nice and light and prevents its anti-ant strands snapping. And then, if that wasn't clever enough, air can circulate through the lattice, keeping the pupa dry and preventing fungal infections.
If it was just enclosed like a lot of species that we have in, say, Europe or North America, there's not as much humidity and not as much rain in these environments. So in the rainforest, we think it's this open structure so it doesn't drown.
This delicate, intricate structure is actually completely and wonderfully, well, practical. So you might expect that the moth that would emerge from this would be of great mesmerising beauty, a paragon amongst moths. Well, ladies and gentlemen, young people, I give you the Uridid moth. I'm afraid it's rather drab.
But thankfully, our next weird discovery is far more colourful as we venture into the rainforests of Borneo, home to some very unusual plants. Hidden amongst the greenery are some hair-raising hunters, pitcher plants. Most plants get nutrients through their roots, but these peculiar plants have an altogether more sinister strategy. They eat meat. Now, all pitchers are pretty wonderfully weird, but there's one particular species that's puzzled botanists for decades, Nepenthes hemsdiana, because, well, it's a picky eater.
This species catches 7 times fewer insects than its closest relatives. It's practically a vegetarian. But if it isn't eating insects, what is it eating?
In 2014, a scientific expedition to Borneo captured these incredible images. Bats inside the pitcher plant. Could this be the first documented case of a bat-eating plant? Captivated by these images, bat experts Michael and Caroline Scherner travelled from Germany to the jungle to find out if the plant really had developed a taste for bats.
We don't think that the plants have evolved to digest these kinds of animals. They have evolved to digest arthropods, insects, for example. Potentially, bats would be able to die inside, but it's more than unlikely, I would say.
So if the pitcher plant wasn't eating the bat, what was going on? Perhaps the bat was the one hoping for a meal.
We had this idea at the beginning that the bats might steal insects from the pitchers, but actually it's not working because the bats can never reach this fluid.
No, these peculiar pitcher plants weren't providing a free lunch. They were offering something much more unusual.
These pitchers, they have a very stable microclimate inside. So during the hottest hours of the day, they are cooler than the outside temperature. And this is something which bats absolutely like.
So, these pitcher plants make the perfect air-conditioned place to rest during the heat of the day. But what's in it for the plant? Why is this carnivore cuddling up to a bat? Well, this guest leaves a gift behind.
Bat feces contain a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus and also potassium. Those nutrients are missing in the areas where the plants are growing.
This extraordinary pitcher plant has evolved to survive almost entirely on the poo of its guest, relying on the bat to bring it sustenance.
I just love this. A perfectly strange symbiosis between a plant and its small, furry friend. And it's a win-win situation. The pitcher provides the perfect bat bag. And of course, the bat benefits. At the same time, the pitcher's thriving on the bat's poo, and their survival is intricately intertwined. There's just one last piece to the puzzle. How does the plant attract the bat?
Well, we know that bats use echolocation to find their way around. They send out high-frequency calls and use the reflected sound waves to build up a picture of the forest around them. But Borneo has over 15,000 species of plants and more than 30 types of pitcher plant. So how does this particular one make sure that the bats find it? Well, would you believe the pitcher has evolved to become noisier? Its back wall is unusually wide and curved, just to reflect and amplify the bat's calls. It's the perfect bat beacon. And it works like a dream.
Amazing. Not only has the pitcher evolved to fit the bat like a glove, it's also come up with a structure that acts as an advertisement which says, "This is the best bat hotel in town." Now, honestly, that's why I get up in the morning. That's proper biology.
And finally, we investigate a very serious danger from the Australian bush. Danger from above.
So a drop bear is like a cross between a polar bear and a koala bear that potentially could drop out of a tree when you're out camping, for example.
It's probably almost as deadly as the crocodile, but you just, yeah, almost.
And remember, look up when in the outback.
Many places around the world have their own legends of mythical creatures. Scotland has the Loch Ness Monster. North America has Bigfoot. And Australia has the drop bear.
The drop what?
A truly terrifying beast that can climb trees and drop down on you from above.
The drop bear, a fearsome, koala-like creature that preys on the weak and unsuspecting, but also just a piece of Australian folklore, the sort of thing you hear around a campfire to scare you if you're a tourist or give you nightmares if you're a kid. Couldn't possibly be any truth in it. Or could there?
In 2015, in a remote corner of Western Australia, researchers found weird scratch marks high up on a cave wall. Scratches that were vital clues. Clues to shed a new light on the mysterious drop bear.
You see, those scratches might actually point to some evidence that proves that the drop bear is more than a tall tale.
Scratch marks on a cave wall that wouldn't mean much to you or I, but to one paleontologist, this was a monumental discovery. Our story begins almost 2 centuries ago.
With the settlement of Australia in the 1800s, pastoralism was moving out beyond the main centres of occupation like Sydney and Melbourne. In the process, people were stumbling on the remains of large animals that they knew nothing of. This was the Australian megafauna, giant animals.
One of these early finds was a skull of a very strange-looking animal, about the size of a leopard. It had the front teeth of a herbivorous marsupial, like a kangaroo or a koala. But its cheek teeth were huge, sharp blades, the kind you would expect from a meat-eater. A marsupial with carnivorous teeth? Now that's a very weird find indeed.
It was so unusual, it was like no other species ever seen.
It was given a very fitting scientific name, Thylacaleo carnifex, which translates as the marsupial lion, the butcher. But what exactly was this mysterious beast? Well, with only a skull to go on, it was anyone's guess and would stay a mystery for 100 years. Until a young paleontologist made a huge breakthrough.
In 1969, I was exploring with a colleague. We detected a gust of air coming out of a rock pile. So we wriggled through into a chamber, and in that chamber there was a silt floor with these funny sawtooth patterns. And when my eyes got accustomed, I looked down, and there at my feet was the upturned skull of the marsupial lion. Incredibly exciting. I can still get excited telling you about it. To the side of that, there was the arm of the lion with a hand reaching up out of the sediment against the rock.
And on the arm were long, sharp claws, exactly the sort a predator would use to catch and hold on to prey. Over the next few decades, more discoveries of complete skeletons helped flesh out a picture of a truly terrifying predator.
This animal can produce the most powerful bite known for any living mammal.
It could crush a skull in a single bite. It really is the stuff of nightmares. But can we say that this was the drop bear? Well, remember those scratches on the cave wall?
In just recent times, a couple of my colleagues have been examining scratch marks on the walls of caves in which we find the marsupial lion. This seems to suggest that they were actually actively climbing in and out of the cave.
If it could climb out of a cave, then potentially it could climb a tree. And if it could climb a tree, then it could drop out of it onto unsuspecting prey. You can see where I'm going? It's beginning to sound more and more like the drop bear. I suppose the question then is, how could the legend pass into the present day?
Well, just look at this rock art made by Indigenous Australians more than 40,000 years ago. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Experts believe this is most likely our marsupial lion. And if so, it's direct evidence that some people came face to face with it and lived to tell the tale.
A tale that could make even the scariest campfire story imaginable, real even, perhaps memorable enough to pass on to the next generation and the next generation, all the way down to the present day. And you never know, it might still be out there. If ever you're camping in Australia, you might want to look up.
From the discovery of an alien cocoon to a plant that makes a home for a bat, and the unravelling of an ancient legend.
I find it strangely reassuring that when we finally explain one of these weird mysteries, we become aware that there are still loads more out there to be solved. There's no doubt at all that there are plenty of puzzles left on our planet.
Next time, we investigate vampire fish, head-banging sharks, and some very weird waves.
A deeply moving documentary marking the anniversary of one of the UK's darkest days now, Surviving Aberfan over on BBC4. Whilst on BBC One, things are getting very tasty for the contestants in The Apprentice, as Lord Sugar lives up to his name. But there's nothing sweet about the fall next here on BBC Two, as Stella comes face to face with Sally Ann's desperation.